do this now. Maybe I might be able to do like all of this. I mean, I might drop a little bit of frames here for just a minute while I pull a bunch of shit up, but this seriously might it might actually work. Oh my god. It is. It's working. Wow. We're everywhere. We're everywhere. We're live on Facebook. We're live on Rumble. We're live on Twitch. We're live on YouTube. And dang. That's awesome. Everything's going great so far. Very, very smooth. Very smooth. Um Let me go here. Content. No text content. See all content. Do I have to add? Oh, no, I don't. Okay, okay. This is live. Post insights. I can edit the post. No, I can. No, discard. I can edit the live video. That'll let me edit the title and everything, right? Okay, cool. Sorry guys. I'm this is not a professional thing at all. Okay? It's been so long since I have uh done anything like this consistently, and so just bear with me for just a minute, okay? Just bear with me. I got to make a poll here. Uh Save. How do I publish this? Oh, I can activate. Activate poll. Okay, that's cool. All right. Um, Goal prompt was sent. That looks great. That looks good. I just need to figure out. Oh, here we go. Uh, Title. Let's see. In this episode, we are exploring. Let's try to keep these descriptions consistent. How Washington decides what you are allowed to believe. Safe. And we're live. We're good. I think we're good. We're still good on the 0 dropped frames. So again, I'm sorry. Okay. My bad. That's on me. That's on me. So, a couple things. First off, the last time I tried to stream, the video was again choppy, and then we just had audio issues throughout, like just a ton of technical problems, and we're no longer having that. Obviously, everything is going peachy, absolutely peachy. Okay, so with that being said, um, I want to go back over everything that that I tried to discuss last time, and then also add in some new stuff that uh that I think is relevant to it that I didn't have last time. So I've taken a lot of time over the last like 3 weeks or so, not only contemplating what the fuck is wrong with this whole situation with streaming and why I couldn't do it for so long, and then also we've had other big releases, right? We've got Epstein, right? All those files coming out. Everybody knows about that. Um, we've got plus we've got the Iran situation happening, the and the attention that I think that situation is also has definitely taken away from Gaza. So I don't want to lose. I don't want people to lose focus on the fact that while the news is reporting on the United States and Iran and how World War III is probably starting. Um, Israel is continuing to bomb the ever living shit out of the Palestinians. Okay, their ethnic cleansing continues, and that little sliver of coverage that they were getting, it's gone. It's gone. And chances are it's never coming back because it's constantly going to be overshadowed by the United States and Iran. As long as this conflict goes on, um, Gaza will be stuck in a shadow, and Israel will be able to continue their ultimate mission, right? Um, and that's just a fact. That's a fact. I mean, what the moment that the Don bent the knee to Bibi, and said, you know what, we'll go ahead and we'll drop those bombs for you, Bibi. Yeah, great guy. Maybe one of the best guys I've ever known. You know, the moment that he bent the knee and said, "Yeah, I'll go ahead and I'll do what no other president fucking wanted to," because they all knew how severe the consequences of those actions could be. Okay. Let me just a second here. Let me straighten you. There we go. Beautiful. Really like this little side cam, personally. So, at any rate, that it is what it is. Agree with it or not, it is what it is. And I'll say what needs to be said, in a part of the country and in a part of the world that is so um, just infested, with Trump supporters. And that's not talking shit on Trump supporters by any means. You are free to vote and support whoever you want. Throw all your money at him. I mean, he's a billionaire, multi-millionaire for sure, probably a fucking billionaire. But go ahead and give him some money, because the campaign needs it. What fucking campaign, bro? You're not running for re-election. I'm just saying, man. If I was getting a $400,000 annual salary, like I would be okay. without all the extra shit that he's already got, you know? Oh, but Happy, he donates that check. He donates that check every month. Look, dude, stop asking me for money and then turning around and donating the check for the money that you stole from me. Why don't you go ahead and you just take that what, $4,000 or whatever it is check that you got, right? $40,000 fucking check per month or whatever that it is. Why don't you take that and you go ahead and you donate it to one of your buddies, and then they'll go ahead and they'll invest it into their company, and then that company can go ahead and turn around and make a political donation right back to your campaign, all tax free and everything like that. All right. I'm sorry. Did I just expose a little bit of the system there? Oh, I'm sorry. Now look, I'm dropping frames all of a sudden. Frames are tanking. They're tanking. There it goes. Oh, I think we leveled back out. I think we leveled back out. I'm waiting. So far, so good. I think that's an ISP issue at that point. Or who knows, maybe I was getting attacked. Who knows? Started going off for a minute. Started started crashing out just for a split second, and then all of a sudden you drop 2,000 frames. Okay, buddy. Okay, buddy. Well, let me just say, look, for most Americans, intelligence agencies, we all know that they exist, but they exist at this really, really comfortable distance, right? And or we think that they exist at a comfortable distance, right? Um, we think that intelligence agencies that they live somewhere else. They live behind these closed doors. They live behind classified stamps and acronyms. Oh, intelligence agencies and their acronyms. But their work always feels abstract and foreign and really removed from daily life, right? Um, and Americans, especially, we like to be all great and think that that espionage only happens overseas. And people were really, really naive about that through the early 2000s. When in reality the big dog was just that's what they were waiting for. They were waiting for 9/11 so that they could get permission to spy on you. But I digress. Prior to the NSA whistleblower happening and then Snowden leaks and everything, um, we really thought that espionage was an overseas thing. That psychological warfare was something that other countries did, but not the United States. And the press, we are taught that the press stands apart, that the press is not supposed to be a participant in the political theater. They are supposed to be a watchdog of the political theater, looking down over it to call them out when they step out of line. That was the idea. And that's why the freedom of the press is in the very First Amendment. It's that important. It's that important. But Project Mockingbird really shattered that illusion. Oh, and I just thought to myself, just a little off, is I started to say some words that the algorithms don't really like. So I'm thinking maybe that's why I dropped frames there for a little bit, and then we had to kind of let it simmer. Just a thought. Off topic, but just a thought. Um but yeah, Project Mockingbird. Um it really uh it really shows us that the press is not is no longer what they say they are. And I hope that most of them now don't even claim to be a watchdog, that they should claim to be more like spokesmen, depending on if it's an election year or not, and depending on if we are invading a country and I don't know, doing some other crazy stuff with our military and other regimes around the world that maybe we think need change. Look at this. The moment I start talking about it, Project Mockingbird shattered that whole illusion of the watchdog. The press is the watchdog, not because it proves some grand conspiracy, um, but because it reveals something more unsettling, I guess. Like it reveals that modern power that doesn't necessarily need like overt control to shape reality, right? Um, it it just needs like it just needs that proximity, uh, and then it needs influence and it needs time. And if you give something that has just a little bit of power, proximity, and influence and time to grow, to fester, if you will, it will. And then and then all of a sudden, that's how it becomes this grand conspiracy because nobody saw it coming. Because I mean, Mockingbird, for example, Mockingbird was not loud. It was quiet. It was patient. But most of all, it was deeply, deeply American. You know, when World War II ended, the United States, the United States inherited something unprecedented. And in 1940, in after 1945, the United States came out richer and more powerful and really just global dominance over everybody else, right? The United States made from that point, the United States was really the country that was deciding how the rest of the world was going to act. We were setting the rules, right? But with that global dominance, paired with it was global anxiety. The atomic bomb had ended one war, but it had inaugurated another. But the next one was not a war of trenches and uniforms, but of it was of ideology. You know, American leaders, they believed that the next conflict would not be fought with just weapons, but they in a way knew that it would be fought with belief, right? Whoever controlled that story, the belief story, would control the future. Plain and simple. I mean, there's nothing else to it. There's really nothing else to it. So, when America figured that part out, that the next war would not just be fought with weapons, but it would also be fought with ideology. Out of that emerged the Office of Strategic Services, the OSS, which would later come to be known as one of our other favorite acronyms, the CIA, the Central Intelligence Agency. Great people. Great people. We love the CIA. The thousands of men and women that work for the CIA, we love them. There's just a few particular bad apples around there that they're not great. Most people, I imagine, are just they're just going to work, just doing the damn thing, right? Bringing home the bacon or whatever. But the CIA and institutions like that, right? Intelligence institutions like that were born not just to collect intelligence, but then to put that information back out into the environment and shape said environment in whatever way they needed to. From the very beginning, the intelligence apparatus of America understood something extremely critical, that they understood that facts alone do not move societies. And there are plenty of modern day examples you can look to as evidence. Narratives move societies. Newspapers, magazines, radio, college, universities, music and art. I mean, even like intellectual journals carry influence, and behind it, they can carry a narrative. And all of those things mattered. all of those things mattered. The man that he referred to his network, we'll call it posse. I don't know why that's the initial like word that came to mind, was like, this guy's got a posse of people, right? But Frank Wisner referred to his network as the Mighty Wurlitzer. He described it as an organ that with countless keys that could be played to produce a single harmonious message. Each key is a voice, and each voice is independent when played independently. But together, those voices can shape consensus. Right? That's not out of this world to say. That's not something that is necessarily unhinged. You get enough people saying the same thing, other people are going to believe it. It's a fact. It's a fact. But the difference is that this was not like metaphorical bravado, right? The whole idea of producing that single harmonious message was operational philosophy. That was, it's like their mission statement, It's like, you go into certain places, certain businesses. I remember I worked for this company, and when you'd walk into the front door, on the wall there was their they had like their mission statement, right? Um, which is always something along the lines of like, we strive to basically do the best job and help everybody and leave no man behind, whatever. Right. So Frank, Mr. Wisner, he provided the vision. Alan Dulles, which is another name that you're going to hear me say a lot in the coming weeks, because he just kind of pops up everywhere. Alan Dulles provided the cover. Alan Dulles was at the time, director of the CIA. And as the Central Intelligence Director, he believed that covert influence was not merely acceptable, but it was necessary. Dulles, I think, in his sort of worldview, right? Everybody has this sort of worldview, right? I described it earlier that espionage doesn't happen in the U.S. and blah blah blah, right? That's a worldview of somebody, or of something. I think in his worldview, truth was contextual. It was all based off context, right? Hey, start saying AD, and all of a sudden you're dropping frames again. I'm telling you, there's these words that we're slowly figuring out. So Big Al is what we're gonna go with going forward, right? I've seen some other creators say that this is also something that has happened to them, but when I look over at this other side, I'm not showing any packet loss, but on one end I do see it, the other end I don't see it. Not packet loss, but drop frames. I'm sorry. Um, I guess this isn't actually showing me a frame drop. It's just showing me packet loss, which is 0. But still, at any rate, um, so Big Al, like I said, he believed that the truth was contextual, that information was more than just words. It could be used as a weapon. It was a weapon. Information was a weapon. The more you know, right? And restraint was a luxury at the time because we're moving into the Cold War, right? We've moved into the Cold War at this point. And so the Cold War doesn't really allow for the luxury of restraint in Big Al's worldview, right? So under his leadership, we know the CIA began to formalize relationships with journalists and media institutions. Some were paid with cash money. Some were paid with information. Some were simply cultivated. Right. The press was not infiltrated and taken over. No. The press was absorbed into the power structures ecosystem, which is why almost no networks, no major networks at least, have budgets for like investigative journalism and things like that anymore, or at least not a significant budget like they used to. And that's pretty sad because to me, I've always thought of a journalist as somebody that man, they just had a hunch, right? They just they just had this feeling, right? Like what's the dude's name that was on Pizzagate? Oh man, what's his name? I can't remember. That dude, like, just had a hunch, like, something don't feel right. Something's wrong. Something's wrong here, and we need to fix it or figure out if like my mind's playing tricks on me, or if my gut, which when you get that gut feeling, like you should really trust that. I'm telling you, because that gut feeling is everything in a lot of situations. It's like a spidey sense, right? But yeah, like I said, the CIA began to formalize relationships with like journalists and media institutions, right? And then that absorbed the press into the power structures ecosystem. And of course, what happens when you get one small thing is absorbed into something else? I mean, it becomes that, right? You're now controlled by that bigger thing. So, press access to high profile individuals, things like that, that became a currency, right? Hey, say good things about me and I'll let you back here in this room, or maybe a leak will happen to you, get you that little bit of recognition, your sources. You have a confidential source name, Donald Dump. That confidential source, one of the greatest confidential sources of all time. Um, so access, right, was became this currency in a way. Um, Staying quiet about the things that the press is is responsible for exposing, staying quiet about those things, cover-ups, like we see in uh in the Big E files, right? Um, Silence was leverage, and how you frame the person in the eyes of the people, that was everything. You know, if the press didn't like you, they didn't like you and you were done. And you know, if these people over here like you, but these people don't, well, these people are going to say good things, and these people don't have nothing good to say at all, but they just don't want you in power, right? Okay. Okay. So framing framing of someone was everything. Everything. So Project Mockingbird, to me, it didn't really it didn't operate like a classic story, like a classic spy story or anything like that. Like there weren't um like CIA um like misinformation, right? Or anything, bylines, flooding newspapers with lies or anything like that. Um because they were using they were using much more subtle mechanisms. And those little things, they were so much more effective. So much more effective. Like journalists, you know, this is access journalism, right? Journalists were invited into rooms that other journalists could not enter. Um, you know, they were given this they were given like, you know, more context into something that everybody else is deprived of. And they were given perspective and background, you know, and they were and these journalists were trusted, and trust creates obligation, right? The press is originally obligated to be the watchdog and let the people know when something ain't right, when something ain't right around here. But trust, when you're getting trust with the wrong people, it still creates obligation. And stories that were like unfavorable to intelligence operations, they were, you know, they were typically delayed and they were softened and they were reframed, um, or they, you know, they weren't even published in the uh, in the name of national security. Golly, they love that word, man. They've been using it for so long. It's like it's, you know, if I had another kid, that might be one of their first words. National security, right? Foreign stories were placed abroad during Project Mockingbird too, and then they echoed all the way back into American discourse through the legitimate channels. So they're injected through the intelligence agencies somewhere else in another country, talking some shit, right? Starting some shit. And then they're like, yo, I got to let America know about this shit. And on their way to tell America, they're letting their buddies know. And then their buddies are like, yo, I got a homie over there in America. I'm going to let that dude know too. And so they're all on their way to America, and they've all got different versions of this fucking story. And then Americans hear that somebody's talking shit, and they think it's somebody all the way over there, when in reality, it's their neighbor Fred. Like that's the genius of Mockingbird. Was was that plausible deniability. And you couldn't call a single article propaganda, and you couldn't condemn a single journalist, like one person for publishing a false story and making false claims. You couldn't condemn them anymore because you had 20 people all publishing the same story, even though it was all bullshit. And even though you had all of that, and people can't tell me they didn't have that gut feeling when certain things just would come out. The cumulative effect was definitely real. So, just fair warning to people that choose to put faith into something that they watch 1 hour or 2 hours of every day, and they are just willing to throw all their belief into it. This might get a little uncomfortable. Mockingbird did not primarily rely on um on talking talking you, it's coercion. That's the word I'm looking for. It didn't primarily rely on that. It it relied on the alignment of views, right? It relied on alignment. So you need to align yourself with certain things because it's going to help your country. And a lot of journalists, I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt, and they believe that they were helping their country, whether that was um, preventing panic, right? Preventing that hysteria. Um, but then you had other journalists who simply wanted access, and access requires cooperation, right? Right. You scratch my back, I scratch yours, but you go first. And then, just kidding, I'm not actually going to scratch your back. I might just give you a little pinch on the cheek and say, good job. Institutions blurred lines that were never like clearly defined to begin with. And the independence of the editor, right? The ability to change and what they want and not have to ask if that's okay. Um, Editorial independence just absolutely eroded. But it didn't take force to do that. It just took familiarity. Because when journalists began to socialize with intelligence officials, they attended the same dinners. They share the same assumptions, right? They fear the same enemies. Objectivity quietly weakened. And just to be clear, that's not an accusation. That is an observation about the human system. It's an observation about how people operate. So let me give you an example real quick of how Mockingbird was implemented into into our world. Okay. The Bay of Pigs invasion was not merely a military disaster, but it was an informational disaster. So before the invasion, reporters uncovered CIA-backed training camps. Okay. These stories were toned down, delayed. We're dropping some frames here again. Looks like we're back. I wonder what I said that time. Pigs? Maybe. I don't think they'd get mad about that. Nobody, they all those fucking social justice warriors online all hate the police. But anyway, before the Bay of Pigs invasion, there were these CIA-backed training camps that were found. Those stories got toned down and, like I said, delayed, and reframed, and the pressure to do that came from the highest levels of government. And maybe not always like explicitly from the highest level. Like it wasn't like, Jack Kennedy was calling up and saying, that was a terrible, terrible thing. You guys, you got to you got to fix it. You got to fix it. You can't, he wasn't calling the fucking New York Times or anything saying that shit. Like, he, the CIA was saying, don't talk about this shit. Right. And then when that invasion failed, because America is so used to not losing, when that invasion failed, the public was absolutely shocked. But they were not shocked at the fact that that mission failed, because had you put it all out on paper and kind of said it out loud to yourself, like it didn't jive. It wasn't gonna fly. Okay. The public was shocked because they had not been informed. Mockingbird did not cause that invasion to happen. It masked how fragile that mission was. Like I said, if you put it out there and you say it out loud, it just didn't, it didn't make sense. So Americans experience this first little, like, hey, like, why didn't we know about that? Like, that's really weird. Like, what's going on here? Something's a little off, right? Vietnam broke the spell that was over people's eyes. As the Vietnam War dragged on, official narratives came from the lived reality that people were going through. Like, body counts were going up. I mean, progress reports, of course, they're going to remain optimistic. You don't want to be like, you know what? I said when I lost 5,000 that we would back out, and I'm sticking to it. No, they're not going to do that. We lost 5,000 good men, and we got 10,000 more to replace them. Vietnam broke the spell that Mockingbird had over America, for the most part. Not for the most part, but what it did was it showed that the narrative that the mainstream was giving, and then what these journalists embedded within military systems found themselves in. That's where the narrative came from. It couldn't come from a document. It was too obvious where it was coming from. So journalists embedded, like I said, with the military systems, they found themselves constrained by access, one, and framing. And then this little document called the Pentagon Papers happened. And for the first time, Americans saw internal documents revealing this systematic deception. And not just of you, the public, but of Congress. There was now a documented credibility gap. It was no longer theoretical. It was no longer well, I don't trust the government, but I don't really know why. I just got a funny feeling. And people are like, whatever, dude. Didn't you just see what they did to Japan for us to defend our freedoms, bro, that were over there? You know? You're probably an anti-Semite too, loser. Why don't you go preach your anti-war hate somewhere else? Loser. A documented credibility gap existed at this point. So by 1975, the American public had grown suspicious, right? Vietnam absolutely fractured trust. It stuck this big old fucking crack in it. And then what happens? Watergate. And Watergate just shatters whatever was left. Any trust that the American public had in the federal government was shattered with the Watergate scandal. And it also confirmed the idea that intelligence agencies, they might have operated maybe a little beyond oversight. And this idea that intelligence agencies do operate beyond oversight was no longer an unthinkable idea. Thanks to Vietnam with the initial crack. And then Watergate just obliterating what was left. So Watergate happens, and that is when the United States Senate formed what became known as the Church Committee. Formerly the Senate Select Committee to study governmental operations with respect to intelligence activities. I am so glad that they did not try to do some stupid acronym with that. The Senate Select Committee to study governmental operations with respect to intelligence agencies. Okay, that's the church committee. We'll stick with church committee. Okay, it's way easier. So the church committee did an investigation, and their final report. I'm gonna read it for you word for word. The final report stated plainly, and I'll quote: "The committee finds that the CIA has, in fact, maintained relationships with several hundred foreign individuals who provided intelligence for the CIA and at times attempted to influence opinion through the use of covert propaganda." What does that sound like today? Somebody that's maybe targeting maybe, certain Christian churches, so that they can convince the Christians that it's okay to worship the government of our greatest ally. They're great. We love them. But let me read that to you again. The committee finds that the CIA has, in fact, maintained relationships with several hundred foreign individuals who provided intelligence for the CIA and at times attempted to influence opinion through the use of covert propaganda. That sentence fucking matters. Okay? There's multiple points in that sentence that are very, very important. Words are important, guys. The committee finds that the CIA has, in fact, maintained relationships. Maintained relationships, not just we had a business transaction and that was it. No, they maintained a relationship with these foreign individuals, right? Who provided intelligence for the CIA and at times attempted to influence opinion through the use of covert propaganda. And just to remind you guys that those are not journalist accusations. Those are the findings of the United States Senate, the Church Committee. The report does go on further. Another quote: approximately 50 of the CIA's assets are individual American journalists or employees of U.S. media organizations. That's not rumored. That's not alleged. That's documented. That's a quote. That's direct from the Church Committee report. Approximately 50 of the CIA's assets are individual American journalists or employees of U.S. media organizations. The Church Committee did not release all names publicly. That is a very, very controversial decision, in my opinion. The Church Committee, I feel like, was set up to not just promote, but establish and enforce transparency in the federal government. And then to turn around and say, I like him. I don't think I want people to know that he was feeding them bullshit for a few years there. I don't want him to lose his job. I don't want him to have to become a podcaster and hope he can make it. So, again, the committee didn't release all the names publicly. But the one thing that the Church Committee did do is it 100% confirmed, without a doubt, that the institution had been infiltrated. So as time goes on, tactics have to change. And as technology advances, tactics have to change. But we all know that the CIA and the intelligence apparatus as a whole, once they start a project, it never really stops, does it? Systems don't stop. They don't disappear. They do, however, evolve. And the belief that narrative control is essential to national security, it didn't just fucking magically vanish in 1975 when the church committee exposed what was happening. It 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 just packed its bag and said, "Okay, sorry. All right, I'll leave. I'll leave. I'll leave. I'll leave." Yo, what up? What up, public affairs offices? Yo, I'm over here. I just started this new thing. Oh yeah, what's it called? What's it called? What's it called? Um, it's kind of funny. We're all like in this room, just like a fish tank, right? And we're all just thinking about stuff. Like how to take over the world, or how to control the economy, or yeah, I don't know, ethnically cleanse an entire population of people. Um, Something like that, right? Um, that's what we think about over there. Oh, really? That sounds crazy. Are you guys experts? Yeah, we've got an expert. Yeah. Yeah, we got an expert. Tony. Tony is an expert. And I mean, I don't know what he's an expert in, but it's something. It's something. But that's what happens. It just the system just moved. That's all it did. I think we're good. We're leveled back out. I must have said another word. What did I say? What did I say this time? Hmm. I don't know. Um, but yeah, you got like think tanks, right? Strategic communications, right? And then later on, as the internet came to the world and ever to the rest of the world, right? You had digital influence operations and social media, things like that. The tools have changed, but that same philosophy of controlling the narrative, it it will never die. It will endure for as long as people continue to try to build nations. It will endure, I think. Um, so why am I going over Project Mockingbird? Um, well, Mockingbird matters a lot. And it matters not because it proves corruption. I think at this point we all know that the uh, the level of corruption within the government as a whole, not just talking the highest levels, I'm talking as a whole, is is out of control, completely out of control, right? Um, we know that, but it reveals Mockingbird kind of reveals this structure, right? It shows how like power prefers like influence over force. Power would rather influence you and convince you of something than force you to bend the knee, right? I'd rather you voluntarily come bend the knee yourself because they have learned how to shape truth without having without the truth being fabricated. They just they shape it, they change it. And the other thing that it shows, that Mockingbird really shows, is how how democracy can be weakened from within. How it can be weakened without being openly attacked. And this is what I think is most important. It really teaches us that a quote unquote free press is not able to sustain itself. It requires distance from power. The press does. It has to have distance between it and the those in power. And it is the public's job, the people's job, to be vigilant about the press maintaining that distance. It requires distance from power, vigilance from the public. And if we are not vigilant in making sure that they are fulfilling their duties as the press and their duty to report the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth to us, the people, it we have the press is going to become corrupt, just like the rest of the system. Mockingbird, it was not it wasn't really like a villain with a face. It wasn't like this person that created this whole thing and executed this whole thing and then it became out of control, right? It was this system that was built by people who believed that they truly believed, I think, that they were doing the right thing. The people at the top probably maybe saw a bigger picture with the amount of control that it could bring. But I think that the majority of people, again, that were going into work every day, were just doing that. They were going into work, and they were trying to just make a buck just like everybody else. But because it was built by people who truly thought that they were doing the right thing, that is also what makes Mockingbird so dangerous. History doesn't repeat itself just through evil acts alone, right? Because those evil acts that by themselves are still evil, and everybody will state that they are evil unless they are justified somehow. And then that's how history continues to repeat itself, through justification. The question that I think really comes to mind is, it's not whether Mockingbird existed or not, because it did. It's really whether like we are capable of recognizing the modern equivalent to Mockingbird. And then when we do recognize the modern equivalent, are we willing to have vigilance and confront whatever that equivalent may be. Are we going to confront that evil when we recognize it, or we're just going to keep going about our day? I mean, it's a legit question. Like, are we, what are we doing? So, yeah. So, I am going to just run and use the bathroom real quick. I'll be back in about 3 minutes. And while I do that, you guys can enjoy my little cats back here. Well, one of them's little, the other one is not so little. But enjoy them sleeping. I'll be right back. All right. So Mockingbird, right? We've all heard about it recently, probably. It is what it is. It's happened. And we now know, or we should at least have learned how to recognize some of those things. When you see something that just there is no other alternative story or anything like that, start thinking that maybe, just maybe, you might be looking at like something like a psychological operation. Okay. When everybody's saying the same thing, there's an agenda. There really is. It's almost never that everybody is uh on the same page with just about anything. Big E's like the most bipartisan supported thing, like, probably ever. And our AG says, no, I'm not going to follow the law. Like 400-1 in the House, or 400-0 in the House, unanimous. Like 99-1 in the Senate, and signed by, reluctantly, of course, signed by POTUS. Okay? Like there's there's somebody higher up saying, "Nah, you don't have to do that. Don't worry, Pam. I got you, girl. You don't got to do that." You can even tell him that you're not going to. And then just follow up, just look at him. What are you going to do about it? What are you going to do about it? Just saying, man. How do you be the top law enforcement official in the country and openly violate federal law? I don't. When Can somebody explain that to me, please? Because I would like to also, at times, violate federal law, and I would just maybe like to know like what ones I can violate and what ones maybe I can't. Like, let me know in advance so that everything's good. Right? That'd be nice. That would be really really nice of you guys. But I digress. But I digress. You know, just listening to like some of the news and stuff, dude, it's so funny. Like listening to these people, how like how there's so many dude, there's so many experts. Like I have never I've met a few experts at a couple of things in my lifetime. But somehow media outlets are able to find experts like 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 they're a dime a dozen, you know? And their famous words are always experts say. Oh, experts say, right? Oh man. They say experts say this policy is necessary. Or what's another good one? Experts say this conflict is unavoidable. Or experts say this country is a threat to our national security. Experts say that this war will be quick. It will be in and out. And when most people hear that phrase, they they think of something comforting, right? They imagine neutrality or objectivity, maybe, or maybe they imagine a scientist in a lab coat, like actually doing science shit, studying data, right? Delivering real results, conclusions. But Washington doesn't really work like that. Um, you know, Washington has something else. They have a pipeline of experts. They got a funnel, right? These experts are just right. And then once you see that funnel, you start noticing some of the same names, right? The same the same institutions, and then you start seeing the same conclusions appearing again and again. And you're not seeing the same conclusions because every expert is corrupt. That's not what I'm saying at all. You're seeing the same conclusions because the system rewards a certain kind of expert and disciplines the other. And it will always reward the expert that already agrees with it. Tell me I'm wrong. So here's how the funnel works. Okay. So, step one, you got government. Someone who works inside of the national security world, like Pentagon, State Department, National Security Council, basically anybody in the intelligence community and that apparatus of things, um, or maybe somebody who helps design policy, lawmaker, um, or maybe they uh, support an intervention, or they argue for sanctions. Maybe they write strategy memos. Um, but that's step one, government, right? But after that person does those things, their administration ends, right? And they leave government, right? But they don't really leave that ecosystem. You know, they move, they level up. They move to step two, right? Step two, we talked about it, right? Think tanks. That's one of the most common transitions. Somebody leaves government, they move to step two. That's a think tank. So, like institutions like the Brookings Institution, or the Council on Foreign Relations, or so think tank, the Foundation for Defense of Democracies, the FDD. All of those names, when you say them out loud, they sound super academic. They sound super academic. And some of the work that those institutions do, it absolutely is. It is. But those institutions, like the Council of Foreign Relations, they also function as the staging grounds for policy ideas. And these ideas are presented and mulled over, and eventually those ideas return to government. So think about what happens next. The former government official that we originally talked about, right? They argue for sanctions, or they support an intervention, right? Um, they write strategy memos, whatever. They have left government, and now they become a fellow, if you will. They publish reports, they write op-eds, and appear in television hit pieces, and suddenly the person who once helped write and craft policy is now an independent expert explaining why that policy is correct. And the public no longer sees a government official, they see an analyst. But Washington sees something totally different. They see a familiar voice, somebody who's already been in the system and is still in the system, somebody they can trust. Yeah. Somebody safe. So now let's go to step three. Media. So television producers, for example, they need guests constantly. News moves fast. Deadlines are brutal. So when a crisis happens somewhere in the world, uh, producers don't have time to find new voices that may be an actual expert in that crisis. So what do? They just they just call the same list. The same think tanks, the same fellows, the same former officials, and within hours of something happening halfway across the world, a narrative begins forming here in the United States or any, in a different part. But I'm going to say the United States because that's where I'm at. And I can criticize my own government if I want to. But a narrative starts forming within hours. And then you start having the experts who say this country is dangerous, or Lindsey Graham, or experts say action must be taken, right? Delay would be absolutely catastrophic. And it's just the same cycle. But the cycle is where the funnel begins to really become powerful when that cycle begins. Those experts, the ones that are explaining whatever the crisis is that on television, are often the same people who helped design the policies that created the crisis in the first place. Not always. I will say that, not always. But it happens so often that the pattern becomes obvious once you start fucking looking for it. You want proof? Okay. I'll give you an example. The lead up to the Iraq War. In the early 2000s, the American public was told something over and over and over again. And to this day, I can hear it in my head. I was 11 years old when 9/11 happened, but I remember it like it was yesterday. Just it's one of those memories that you just don't ever get rid of. But the American public in the early 2000s was told something over and over and over again, that Iraq had weapons of mass destruction, and that those weapons posed an immediate threat to the United States of America and her people. They were told, the American public was told, that action was necessary, it was urgent, and it was inevitable. And who delivered that message? Politicians did, sure, but remember that trust in politicians is gone, right? And it has been gone for 25 plus years at this point. So politicians, sure, they delivered that message that like action was urgent, it was necessary, it was inevitable, it was going to happen, whether we did it today or we did it next year, it was going to happen. It's inevitable. War is inevitable. Listen to your people that you're voting for out there, people. Okay? If they are supporters of war, they do not care about you. So the politicians delivered the message. Nobody gave a shit because nobody trusts them. Who do people trust? The experts. Yeah, the political analysts, the security scholars, the former, well, I love saying former intelligence officials, because once you're in the intelligence world, the stereotype is you never really leave. But former intelligence officials, right, who are told what they can and cannot say, or the experts that are writing papers, and then they are on television on the evening news explaining why intervention in Iraq was necessary. And so the expert funnel was fully operational. Think tank paper, media interview, congressional testimony, policy decision. 25 years later, my majority of my life, the war on terror was the majority of my life. 25 plus years later, and the weapons of mass destruction still have never been found, never will be, because they were never there. But something fascinating happened afterward. Many of the same voices that said that Iraq has weapons of mass destruction, many of those same voices remained prominent in the national security conversation. Why? Why? Their assessment of Iraq was terrible. Put us in a 25-year war. Millions dead. Billions, or if not trillions, in damages. But they got to keep their jobs as the pundits for the national security conversation. They weren't disgraced. They weren't removed. They're just chilling in the funnel, thinking about explaining the next crisis and how to spin it. So that's the part that people really struggle to understand, is that the funnel doesn't, the expert funnel doesn't punish being wrong. It just rewards being aligned. So if the expert analysis fits comfortably within the worldview of DC's foreign policy establishment, well, then the expert's career gets to continue. Even if the events after that prove the expert to be incorrect, the person who was not aligned with the initial worldview is the person they're already been shunned because they didn't bend the knee. So I mentioned incentives, right? Think tanks, they require funding. Lots of funding. Like they need to be in DC so that they can be at the, they can be around all these politicians, and buildings in Washington, DC, they are not cheap. Your researchers in the think tanks, they need salaries. Your think tank programs need budgets. And funding has to come from somewhere, right? Obviously, private donors, foundations, corporations, and sometimes the taxpayer. And none of that automatically means corruption. But remember that incentives can most definitely shape outcomes. Actually, I think incentives always shape outcomes. If a think tank receives funding from industries tied to defense spending, do you think that the think tank will produce reports arguing for massive cuts to military budgets? If donors prioritize aggressive foreign policy, researchers learn quickly which ideas get rewarded. Again, that's not necessarily corruption. It's just incentives. It's kind of this quiet architecture of influence, right? So we're still moving through the funnel, okay? And we're at the final step of the funnel. And the final step is returning to government. So the fellow, the original government official, becomes an advisor. And then the advisor becomes an official. And the official becomes a policymaker. And suddenly, the person explaining policy on television is now writing it. And your pipeline's complete. Government, think tank, media, back to government. Government, think tank, media, back to government. Over and over and over and over again. And you know what's strange? You want to know what's strange? Is that none of that I just told you, none of that's a secret. It's not like hidden in anything classified. It's not hidden away in some classified doc, right? That we're waiting for it to be dropped. Like, it's public information. Resumes will list these positions proudly. Officials will announce these fellowships, and then think tanks celebrate when alumni return back to government. It's considered normal, I guess, because inside Washington, D.C., I guess it is. But for all of you in Washington, D.C., as somebody who lives outside of Washington, D.C., not just outside of it, but very far from it, I want to let you guys know that the public, us, we see something different. Y'all see these experts and neutral voices, independent analysis, and we see those things too as the normal public, but we don't see the funnel. We don't see the institutional alignment behind the commentary. We don't get to see those things. So another question would be, what does this mean for democracy? Well, I think we can all agree that a healthy democracy depends on debate, real debate, not Trump Biden debate. Okay, I'm talking real debate. Different perspectives, competing ideas, but when the expert pipeline narrows the range of voices appearing in media and government, they also narrow and constrain the debate. Not fake. They don't make the debate fake, just super limited. And then the conversation stays within acceptable boundaries, and policies outside of those boundaries, well, they rarely receive any serious attention. When you start hearing phrases like there is no alternative, or this policy is inevitable, or serious experts agree, when they lead with that, treat those as red flags, like warning signs, not proof or evidence of any conspiracy, just proof of consensus inside a closed system. And I have a deeper issue with that, because when citizens believe that they're hearing the full range of analysis, but what they're actually hearing is a narrow slice of the policy community, their decisions as voters become distorted as well. Because they think that they're informed. But the information it's already been filtered, right? By incentives and institutions, by the funnel. Now, none of what I said means that the experts are useless. Experts are necessary. Foreign policy is complicated. And security issues, they require knowledge. But let me make it clear that expertise and independence are not the same thing. And confusing the two can lead to dangerous assumptions. You know, the job of a citizen in a democracy isn't to reject expertise. It's to question it. To ask, where the analysis comes from. Like, to ask who funds the institution and what incentives exist behind the conclusions. And it's not to dismiss the experts. I'm not saying that they don't know what they're doing or anything like that. Not at all. But it's to better understand the system that produces the experts that you see time and time again. And because power rarely operates like through dramatic conspiracies, it operates through much better through structure, through incentives, and through institutions that shape outcomes without anyone really needing to issue like a secret order, right? That's the whole like genius of the expert funnel. There's no villain required. It's just a system. And it quietly produces the same fucking answer over and over again until you believe it. So next time you hear the phrase experts say, just pause for a moment and ask yourself just a few simple questions. Where does this expert work? Who funds that institution? Where did they work before? Where might they work next? And because once you ask those questions, the funnel will start to appear. And then once you see the funnel, the conversation about war, policy, and power becomes a lot harder to ignore. Let me say that again. The next time that you hear the phrase experts say, shut the fuck up and listen for a minute. Ask yourself a few simple questions. Where do they work? Who funds where they work? Where did they work before this? And where are they going to go after? And then once you answer those questions and start to answer those questions, the expert funnel will appear. And then once you see that, the conversation about, like I said, about war and power and policy and everything else, it becomes a lot harder to ignore. Look, experts don't just interpret the world. Okay. Sometimes they build the story that convinces the rest of us to accept it. They just build the story that convinces the rest of us to accept it. The people that, the experts. Sorry for yawning. Woo. All right. That's it for me, guys. You guys have a good day. Good night. Good day. Good night. Whatever it is. Something like that, like this. Thank you guys for being here. I am happy that majority of the issues stayed to the minimum for the most part, and I'm happy to see that. So, it looks like I don't know. I don't know. Couldn't tell you. But at any rate, thank you guys so much for being here. I appreciate it. Make sure you smash the follow, smash the sub, smash the whatever the buttons are. We're working on 500 on Facebook, and we just got the YouTube channel up and going. So I am going to GTFO and get a little bit of rest before tomorrow. And I hope you all have a lovely, lovely Saturday. Remember to watch out for the truth. And when you find it, foster it in. My name's Happy.